Hello and welcome to today's video tutorial on cardiac cycle. What is cardiac cycle? We know heart beats about 75 times per minute, normally in an adult. Cardiac cycle includes all those events that happen in heart during one beat. Or we can say all those events, all those things, all those processes that happen in heart during each beat. These compose the cardiac cycle. In other words, the cardiac cycle is said to be consisting of the systole and diastole of heart. What is systole? Systole is actually contraction of the muscles of the heart, and diastole is relaxation of the muscles of the heart. When we say atrial systole, it means atrial part of the heart is contracting. When we say atrial diastole, it means atrial part of the heart is relaxing. And when we say ventricular systole, it is the ventricular part of the heart is contracting. What is the cause of this systole? The cause of systole is actually the autorhythmic self-generating system, that is conduction system of the heart. Conduction system, the system that is responsible for the generation of electric current, or the impulse that causes the contraction of the muscles of the heart. The conduction system consists of SA node, AV node, bundle of His, and Purkinje fibers. You can see in the figure here, SA node is called pacemaker. This is the primary tissue that causes the generation of the impulse. This impulse leads to the contraction of the atrial part of the heart, and this impulse also runs to the atrioventricular node, that is AV node. From AV node, this impulse runs through the interventricular wall of the heart through the bundle of His, and then it spreads in the ventricular part of the heart through Purkinje fibers. This SA node, AV node, bundle of His, and Purkinje fibers together form the conduction system of the heart. And when the impulse from SA node comes, it causes atrial systole, and when impulse reaches in ventricular part, it causes ventricular systole. And the systole is followed by the relaxation period, that is called diastole. Now, the cardiac cycle can be studied under different steps. The step 1 is atrial systole, step 2 is ventricular systole, and the step 3 is relaxation period. These are the 3 different steps under which we can study the cardiac cycle. Now, different aspects that are covered during the study of each step of cardiac cycle, that is the pressure inside the atria or ventricles, it is the blood volumes, it is the sounds, the different sounds that are produced while the blood flows from atria to ventricles, or from ventricles into the aortic part of the cardiovascular system. There is pressure, blood volume, sound. These are the different aspects that will be covered while we study the different steps of the cardiac cycle. Now let's understand the cardiac cycle in detail. First of all, as we know, the normal heart rate is 75 beats per minute. Now what will be the time of one beat? One beat of each cardiac each cardiac cycle lasts for about 0.8 seconds. You can see here in the figure how is it possible. In these 0.8 seconds, if we divide each this cardiac cycle time of 0.8 seconds into 0.1 second each, you can see in the figure here the 3 semicircles are formed, and these the 2 areas, the inner area shows the atrial part of the cardiac cycle, and outer area shows ventricular part of the cardiac cycle. Here you can see the atrial systole lasts for 0.1 second, and it is then followed by the relaxation period of 0.7 seconds in case of atria. You can see in ventricles, after the atrial systole happens, after 0.1 seconds ventricular systole begins, and the ventricular systole lasts for 0.3 seconds, and it is for the rest of 0.5 seconds the ventricular diastole happens. And here we can see for 0.4 seconds, both atria and ventricles are relaxing together. This is called giant diastole. Giant diastole. Ventricular diastole is 0.5 seconds, atrial diastole is 0.7 seconds, but in this time period we can see for 0.4 seconds both atria and ventricles are together in the mode of relaxation. This is called giant diastole. Now let's understand the first step of the cardiac cycle, that is atrial systole. The figure here you can see the ECG has been shown, the pressures in atria and ventricles are shown, then heart sounds are shown here, also the volumes, different blood volumes at different times during the cardiac cycle, these are also shown. This detailed figure and it is the complete figure of the cardiac cycle. This will enable us to understand the minute details of the cardiac cycle here. Now let's say the first step of the cardiac cycle, that is atrial systole. Atrial systole lasts for 0.1 second only. During atrial systole, the impulse from the pacemaker it spreads in the walls of the atria and leads to the contraction of it. यानी जब atria contract होते हैं तो pressure inside the atria increases and the blood is pushed into the ventricles. Due to the contraction of the atria, the pressure inside atria increases and the blood is pushed into the ventricles. How much blood? It is about 25 ml. Only 25 ml of blood is pushed from atria into ventricles as a result of atrial systole. But how much blood is present in ventricles at the end of the atrial systole? That's when the atria contract, 25 ml of blood is pushed into ventricles from atria through atrioventricular valves, and at the end of atrial systole there is 130 ml of blood present inside ventricles, each ventricle. Here you can see the curve that is showing blood volumes as the atrial systole. Here the cream colored area of 0.1 second shows that the small amount of blood is pushed and the total volume reaches 130 ml in each ventricle. It means 105 ml of blood has already been there present inside the ventricles. In the coming steps we will be understanding how this 105 ml of blood already reaches inside the ventricles, and extra addition of 25 ml makes 130 ml total blood inside the ventricles, and this is called end diastolic volume. Here you can see this in the figure, that end diastolic volume is 130 ml of blood. Now is the second step of cardiac cycle, that is ventricular systole. Ventricular systole happens as a result of the passage of electric impulse from SA node to AV node, from AV node to bundle of His through Purkinje fibers into the walls of the ventricles. The ventricular systole, the contraction of the ventricles, it lasts for 0.3 seconds. And you can see here the pressure curve shows that as ventricular systole begins, the pressure inside the ventricles rises, and here the blue line of the blue curve that has been shown, it is actually representing left ventricular pressure because right ventricular pressure is smaller than left ventricular pressure, and only left ventricular pressure has been shown here. You can see that the pressure rises to about 120 mmHg as a result of ventricular systole. The pressure inside left ventricle actually I am referring to here. As the pressure inside ventricles begins to rise, in the very beginning, as we can see, when the ventricular pressure passes the atrial pressure, left atrial pressure here is shown in green line or green curve, and the left ventricular pressure is shown in blue color. As the blue line passes the green line, you can see bicuspid valve closes. That is, the ventricular pressure, when it crosses the pressure of the atria, it leads to the closure of the atrioventricular volus. And when the pressure reaches about 80 mmHg, this pressure passes 80 mmHg pressure passes the pressure of the aortic volus. That is, as the ventricular pressure reaches 80 mmHg, the aortic volus open. But there is a brief period of 0.05 seconds after the closure of bicuspid volus and before the opening of aortic volus. This brief period of contraction, it is called isovolumetric contraction. Why isovolumetric? Iso means same. It is after the closure of bicuspid volus and opening of aortic volus. Before the opening of aortic volus, the volume of blood inside the ventricles remains isovolumic. That is, the volume does not change, and this period is called isovolumetric contraction. The pressure inside the ventricles reaches about 120 mmHg, and then it comes back or it comes down. You can see in the blue curve. It is the time period of 0.25 seconds. Out of 0.3 seconds, it is 0.25 seconds, during which the blood is pushed from ventricles into the aorta. That is, right ventricle pushes into pulmonary aorta and left ventricle pushes into systemic aorta. It happens only when the aortic volus open, pressure inside the ventricles increases, and it keeps the aortic volus open, and the blood is pushed into the aorta during the time period of 0.05 seconds. And now, as the pressure inside the ventricles begins to decrease as a result of diastole, when the pressure reaches around 100 mmHg, the aortic volus close. The closure of aortic volus means that now the blood will be trying to come back into the ventricles because pressure inside the ventricles has come below than the aorta, but it will not be allowed as a result of the aortic volus or the semilunar volus closure. Now, after 100 mmHg pressure, relaxation period begins. That is, diastole begins, and the pressure inside ventricles comes down, and a time comes when the pressure inside the ventricles comes below than the atrial pressure. Atrial pressure is more than the ventricular pressure. It is this pressure difference. What pressure difference? That when the pressure inside the ventricles comes below than the atria, the atrioventricular volus open. प्रेशर डिफरेंस है. प्रेशर डिफरेंस, जब वेंट्रिकल्स के अंदर प्रेशर एट्रिया से ज़्यादा है तो एट्रियोवेंट्रिकुलर वॉल्व्स बंद हो जाते हैं और वो ब्लड को ऊपर एट्रिया के अंदर आने नहीं देते. और जब वेंट्रिकल्स के अंदर प्रेशर एट्रिया से कम है तो तब एट्रियोवेंट्रिकुलर वॉल्व्स ओपन हो जाते हैं और ब्लड ऊपर से नीचे आना स्टार्ट होता है. तो हम ये कह सकते हैं कि इट इज़ अबाउट 75% ऑफ द फिलिंग ऑफ वेंट्रिकल्स दैट हैपन्स बिकॉज ऑफ प्रेशर डिफरेंस. यानी हम कह सकते हैं कि जिस वक्त प्रेशर डिफरेंस है और प्रेशर वेंट्रिकल्स के अंदर एट्रिया से कम है, एट्रियोवेंट्रिकुलर वॉल्व्स ओपन हो जाते हैं और ब्लड की फिलिंग स्टार्ट हो जाती है रिलैक्सेशन पीरियड के दौरान ही. When the aortic volus close, यानी आफ्टर द वेंट्रिकुलर इजेक्शन, जब वेंट्रिकल्स ने 0.25 सेकंड्स तक ब्लड को भेज दिया ऑर्टे के अंदर, सिस्टमिक या पल्मोनरी ऑर्टे के अंदर, पीछे कितना ब्लड बचता है? तो आउट ऑफ 130 ml था एंड डायस्टोलिक वॉल्यूम, 130 ml में से पीछे जो ब्लड बच रहा है दैट इज 60 ml. 60 ml of blood remains behind and only 70 ml of blood is pushed into ऑर्टे. ठीक है, तो जो 60 ml ऑफ ब्लड बिहाइंड रहता है दैट इज कॉल्ड एंड सिस्टोलिक वॉल्यूम. एंड डायस्टोलिक वॉल्यूम at the end of relaxation period, the total volume of blood inside the ventricle was 130 ml, but 70 ml of blood हर एक वेंट्रिकल से 70 ml ऑफ ब्लड जा रहा है ऑर्टे के अंदर, तो बिहाइंड जो रह रहा है दैट इज 60 ml, तो 60 ml ऑफ ब्लड इज कॉल्ड एंड सिस्टोलिक वॉल्यूम, दैट इज एट द एंड ऑफ द सिस्टोल द वॉल्यूम ऑफ ब्लड प्रेजेंट इनसाइड द वेंट्रिकल इज 60 ml। तो थर्ड स्टेप रिलैक्सेशन पीरियड। रिलैक्सेशन पीरियड में वेंट्रिकल्स के अंदर प्रेशर बहुत कम आ रहा है और प्रेशर एट्रिया से भी नीचे जा रहा। तो जब एट्रिया से नीचे प्रेशर गया वेंट्रिकल्स का, तो एट्रियो वेंट्रिकुलर वाल्व्स ओपन हो गए और वेंट्रिकल्स की फिलिंग स्टार्ट हो गई। तो रिलैक्सेशन पीरियड के दौरान चूंकि सिस्टोल से एट्रियल सिस्टोल से 25 ml ब्लड नीचे पुश हुआ और 60 ml बचा रेजिडुअल वॉल्यूम बाद में, तो 60 + 25 होता है 85। तो आउट ऑफ 130 85 माइनस करते हैं तो पीछे बचता है 45 ml ऑफ ब्लड। तो 45 ml ऑफ ब्लड is filled in ventricles because of the pressure difference during relaxation period. Relaxation period is the third step of the cardiac cycle, और रिलैक्सेशन पीरियड के दौरान क्या होगा, वेंट्रिकल्स का प्रेशर कम हो जाएगा, ऑर्टिक वॉल्यू क्लोज हो जाएगा 100 mmHg के आसपास, और फिर आइसो वॉल्यूमेट्रिक रिलैक्सेशन पीरियड आएगा, यानी जब ऑर्टिक वॉल्यू क्लोज हो जाएंगे और एट्रियो वेंट्रिकुलर वॉल्यूज की ओपनिंग बाद में होगी। तो इस ऑर्टिक वॉल्यू के क्लोजर के बाद और एट्रियो वेंट्रिकुलर वॉल्यूज की ओपनिंग से पहले जो टाइम पीरियड है 0.05 सेकंड, दैट्स कॉल्ड आइसो वॉल्यूमेट्रिक रिलैक्सेशन। उस टाइम पीरियड के दौरान वेंट्रिकल्स की ब्लड वॉल्यूम में कोई चेंज नहीं आता, और जब प्रेशर डिफरेंस हो जाता है, जब प्रेशर वेंट्रिकल्स के अंदर कम हो जाता है ऑरिकल से, एट्रिया से, तो वेंट्रिकुलर फिलिंग स्टार्ट होती है, और वेंट्रिकुलर फिलिंग से 45 ml ऑफ ब्लड पुश होता है वेंट्रिकल्स में, और सिस्टोल से, एट्रियल सिस्टोल से ओनली 25 ml ऑफ ब्लड पुश होता है नीचे। तो एज ए रिजल्ट ऑफ दिस 70 ml ऑफ ब्लड comes from atria to ventricles and 60 ml is residual volume, and the total volume at the end of atrial systole वो हो जाता है 60 + 70 that is 130 ml, और जिसको कहा जाता है एंड डायस्टोलिक वॉल्यूम। तो एंड सिस्टोलिक वॉल्यूम इज 60 एंड डायस्टोलिक वॉल्यूम इज 130। 25 ml होता है सिस्टोल, एट्रियल सिस्टोल से नीचे, और 45 ml ऑफ ब्लड इज पुश्ड एज ए रिजल्ट ऑफ प्रेशर डिफरेंस, यानी वेंट्रिकल्स का प्रेशर रिलैक्सेशन पीरियड के दौरान जो एट्रिया से कम रहता है, और रिलैक्सेशन पीरियड जॉइंट जब चलता है 0.4 सेकंड से, उस पीरियड के दौरान ये सारा ब्लड नीचे आ जाता है 45 ml। नाउ हार्ट साउंड्स भी अगर हम समझ लें, हार्ट जनरली प्रोड्यूसेस 4 साउंड्स ड्यूरिंग कार्डियक साइकिल, लेकिन 4 साउंड्स में जो लाउडर साउंड्स होती हैं दे आर S1 एंड S2। और S1 साउंड कब प्रोड्यूस होती है, जब वेंट्रिकल के अंदर प्रेशर बढ़ने लगता है और एट्रिया के प्रेशर से जब क्रॉस होता है तो उस वक्त एट्रियो वेंट्रिकुलर वॉल्व्स क्लोज हो जाते हैं, यानी व्हेन वेंट्रिकुलर सिस्टोल बिगिंस and the pressure inside the ventricles increases, then the pressure inside atria, तो atrioventricular valves close होते हैं, तो उस closer से जो sound produce होती है that is the lub sound or the S1। and S2 कब होती है, S2 happens due to the closure of aortic valves, यानी जब वेंट्रिकल्स के अंदर प्रेशर कम होने लगता है और वो प्रेशर कम हो जाता है then the pressure inside aorta, तो blood starts rushing back into the ventricles, but that is prohibited, that is prevented because of the closure of aortic valves, semilunar valves, उनके closure से जो sound produce होती है that is S2, that is dup sound, DUPP, और ये sound थोड़ा low होती है first sound से। S3 and S4 साउंड्स प्रोड्यूस होती हैं ब्लड के रश होने से, तो वो इतनी डिटेक्टेबल नहीं होती हैं। इसके अलावा कार्डिक साइकिल में अगर हम ECG को देखें तो ECG कंसिस्ट्स ऑफ P वेव्स, QR एंड T वेव। तो P वेव एट्रियल सिस्टोल से प्रोड्यूस होती है, QRS वेंट्रिकुलर सिस्टोल से प्रोड्यूस होती है, एंड T इज रिलैक्सेशन पीरियड। तो एट्रियल सिस्टोल दैट इज द फर्स्ट स्टेप ऑफ कार्डिक साइकिल, दैट इज शोन बाय P वेव, हम देख सकते हैं। सेकंड इज वेंट्रिकुलर सिस्टोल, और ये शो होता है QRS से, QRS you can see in the figure here, और T wave that is relaxation period, तो relaxation period T wave को शो करता है, and every cardiac cycle is followed by next cardiac cycle। तो ये सारे इवेंट्स जो एक कार्डियक साइकिल में हुए, जैसे हमने कहा एट्रियल सिस्टोल, वेंट्रिकुलर सिस्टोल और डायस्टोल या रिलैक्सेशन पीरियड या जॉइंट रिलैक्सेशन पीरियड हम कह सकते हैं, So these are the different steps that happen during one heartbeat, and this is called cardiac cycle.